She called the cops and pointed at me like I robbed the place. I was just standing at the counter inside the small town post office, holding a stack of envelopes with my name on them, when Karen stormed in like she owned the building. "That mail belongs to the HOA," she shouted. "He is not allowed to receive it." Everyone froze. The old man behind me slowly turned his head. The lady filling out a money order stopped writing. Even the ceiling fan sounded louder. I blinked. "It has my name on it." She stepped closer. Too close. "All community mail must go through the HOA office first. You signed the agreement." "I signed no such thing." Her lips tightened. "You moved in 3 weeks ago. You don't get special treatment." Special treatment? I had bought that house with my last savings after retiring from the service. Quiet street, small yard, peace. That's all I wanted. Instead, I got Karen. She slammed a thick folder on the counter. "Here, HOA policy, Section 14. All official correspondence must be reviewed by the board before residents open it." The clerk looked confused. "Ma'am, we don't give people's mail to third parties." "I am not a third party," she snapped. "I'm the HOA president." The word president rolled off her tongue like she was running the country. I let out a slow breath. "That still doesn't give you the right to my mail." She pointed at me again. "He's hiding something. That's why he doesn't want us to see it." The room got quiet again. Hiding something? I had just received a certified letter from the county. That's it. I didn't even open it yet. "Sir," the clerk said softly, "do you want to sign for your package?" "Yes." Karen slammed her hand on the counter. "If you hand him that mail, you are interfering with HOA governance." The clerk's eyes widened. "Ma'am, this is a federal building." She laughed. Actually laughed. "You don't understand. The HOA owns this entire development." I tilted my head. "The post office too?" She ignored me. Then she did something crazy. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "Yes," she said loudly, making sure everyone heard. "I need officers at the Maple Grove post office. A resident is attempting to take HOA-controlled documents." The old man behind me whispered, "Is this real life?" I signed from my letter calmly. Karen stared at me like she just caught a criminal. "You think this is funny?" she asked. "No," I said quietly. "I think it's illegal." She smirked. "We'll see." 10 minutes later, two patrol cars pulled up outside. Lights flashing. People from the street started gathering near the windows. This town was small. Nothing ever happened here. Until now. 2 officers walked in. Calm. Professional. "What seems to be the issue?" one asked. Karen stepped forward before anyone else could speak. "This man is violating HOA policy. He refuses to surrender community mail." The officer looked at me. "Sir, it's addressed to me." Karen waved her folder again. "He agreed to HOA authority when he purchased property in Maple Grove." The officer turned to the clerk. "Who's the mail addressed to?" The clerk slid the envelope forward. My full name printed clearly. The officer looked back at Karen. "Ma'am, that's his mail." "It's not that simple," she snapped. "He's under investigation by the board." I raised an eyebrow. "Investigation?" She smiled slightly. "For unauthorized property modifications." I felt a few neighbors outside lean closer to the glass. "What modifications?" I asked. "You built a fence. It's 3 feet high. It blocks the lake view." "My house isn't even near the lake." "That's not the point." The officer rubbed his temple. "Ma'am, this is not a criminal matter." She crossed her arms. "Then I want him removed from the community." "You don't have that authority," the officer said calmly. Her face changed for a split second. Just a crack. Then she recovered. "You clearly don't understand HOA law." The second officer finally spoke. "Mom, are you attempting to take possession of his federal mail?" Silence. The room felt tight. She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed at me again. "He's hiding something. Ask him what that certified letter says." All eyes turned to the envelope in my hand. Truth was, I didn't know what it said, but I had a feeling. I looked at the officer. "Am I required to open my personal mail in public?" "No, sir." Karen's voice dropped lower. "If you open that letter, you'll see why the board needs to review it first." Now that got my attention. "How would you know what's inside?" I asked. For the first time. She hesitated, just for a second. "I have sources." The officer's expression shifted. "Sources?" She straightened up again. "The HOA has legal oversight." I slowly tore open the envelope. Paper slid out. County seal at the top. I scanned the first few lines, and then I smiled. Karen's eyes narrowed. What does it say? I looked at her. Then at the officers. It says, I said calmly, that the land behind my property, the strip everyone thought belonged to the HOA, was misfiled 20 years ago. Karen's face went pale. It legally belongs to me. The room went silent. That includes the lake access path, I added. Outside the window, I saw two neighbors look at each other. Karen laughed nervously. That's impossible. I handed the letter to the officer. He read it, then looked at her. Ma'am, this says he owns the easement. She shook her head. No, that's HOA common ground. Not according to the county. Her breathing changed. This is a mistake, she whispered. I folded the letter slowly. No, I said, the mistake was thinking you could control everything. The first officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, unless there's another issue. This appears to be a civil misunderstanding. Karen's eyes were no longer angry. They were calculating. Ma'am, this says he owns the easement. She shook her head. No, that's HOA common ground. Not according to the county. Her breathing changed. This is a mistake, she whispered. I folded the letter slowly. No, I said, the mistake was thinking you could control everything. The first officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, unless there's another issue. This appears to be a civil misunderstanding. Karen's eyes were no longer angry. They were calculating. You don't understand, she said quietly. That path is important. For what? I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer to me and lowered her voice. You just made a very big mistake. The officer immediately stepped between us. That's enough. She backed up, but her stare didn't leave my face. I'll see you at the board meeting, she said coldly. And next time, bring a lawyer. She walked out. The patrol car stayed a few more minutes. The officers apologized for the trouble. The clerk handed me the rest of my mail. But something didn't sit right. If that land really belonged to me, why was Karen so desperate to stop me from getting that letter? Why did she already know about it? And why did she look scared? Not angry. As I stepped outside, one of the neighbors approached quietly. Do you know what's under that lake path? He asked. I frowned. No. He swallowed. You might want to check. I looked back toward the row where Karen's SUV was parked. She was still sitting inside, watching me. And for the first time since moving here, I realized this wasn't about a fence. It wasn't even about the mail. It was about something buried on land she thought no one would ever own. And now, it was mine. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I stood there holding that letter while Karen's SUV engine kept running across the street. She didn't wave, didn't blink, just stared. The neighbor who spoke to me earlier leaned closer. You really don't know what's under that path? No, I said. He hesitated. Neither do most of us. But every time someone talks about digging near the lake, the HOA shuts it down. That was strange. Why'd? He gave a dry laugh. Because Karen says it's protected land. Protected by who? I walked toward my truck slowly. Karen's window rolled down halfway. You should have stayed quiet, she called out. I was picking up my mail. You just opened a door you can't close. I leaned against my truck. It's my property. She smiled. But it wasn't friendly. That letter won't matter. Oh, it already does. Her fingers tapped on the steering wheel. Fast, nervous. You think this is about land? She asked softly. You have no idea what you stepped into. Then she drove off. That line stayed in my head the whole drive home. You have no idea what you stepped into. When I pulled into my driveway, something felt off immediately. My garbage bins were turned over. My mailbox door was open. And taped to my front door was a bright orange notice. I walked up slowly. Immediate HOA compliance violation. It listed 5 violations: unauthorized fence, unapproved mailbox, improper flag placement, driveway obstruction, and illegal land claim. Illegal land claim? I almost laughed. I pulled it off the door and crumpled it in my hand. That's when I noticed something else. A small sticker at the bottom of the notice. It wasn't official. It wasn't printed. It was handwritten. Board emergency vote tonight. They moved fast. Too fast. I walked around the side of my house toward the path behind my backyard. The one the county letter said belonged to me. The lake shimmered in the distance. Peaceful. Quiet. But something caught my eye. Fresh tire tracks. Leading down the path. I crouched and touched the dirt. Still soft. Someone had driven down here today. I followed the tracks halfway toward the lake before I saw it. A small wooden sign half buried in the grass. It looked old, like it had been ripped out of the ground and tossed aside. I pulled it up. Faded letters. Private access. HOA members only. But underneath, carved faintly into the wood, was an older name. Not Maple Grove HOA. It said, Redwater Development Corp. That wasn't our HOA. I flipped the sign over. On the back was a stamp date, 1998. That was 28 years ago. Maple Grove wasn't even built yet. So who was Redwater? And why was their sign buried on land that now belonged to me? My phone buzzed suddenly. Unknown number. I answered. A man's voice, calm, direct. Is this Mr. Awan? Yes. This is Deputy Collins from County Records. We received confirmation that you collected the corrected deed letter today. Yes. Pause. I need to ask you something. Has anyone contacted you about selling that strip of land? My grip tightened. No. Another pause. If they do, don't agree to anything until you speak with us. With who exactly? With the county legal office. Now that was interesting. Why? I asked. His voice lowered slightly. Because that misfile wasn't an accident. Silence. What do you mean? It was changed in 2006, digitally. The original survey showed that path attached to your parcel. Someone altered the database entry. Someone like the HOA. I didn't say that, but you're thinking it. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, there are pending internal questions about how that record changed. Be careful. The call ended. I stood there staring at the lake. Someone altered county land records, and Karen somehow knew the correction letter was coming before I even opened it. This wasn't about offense. It wasn't about mail. It was about control. And whatever that path connected to. I walked back toward my house, I heard engines. 3 black SUVs turned onto my street at the same time. Not police, not county, private security. They parked along the curb. Doors opened. 4 men stepped out wearing jackets with a logo on the chest. Redwater Property Management. My jaw tightened. So Redwater wasn't dead. One of the men approached my driveway. Sir, he said politely, we're here regarding unauthorized trespassing on restricted access land. I stared at him. That land is mine. He held out a tablet. Our records say otherwise. Your records were changed illegally. His smile faded slightly. Sir, we advise you to stay off that path until ownership is resolved. By who? Redwater Development. That company doesn't own anything here. He glanced at the other men, then back at me. You don't understand how this works. I took a step forward. Explain it. Instead of answering, he looked over my shoulder. I turned. Karen was standing at the end of my driveway, arms crossed, watching. She didn't say a word, but she didn't need to. The man in front of me spoke again. There's an emergency HOA meeting tonight. We recommend you attend. And if I don't, he gave a small shrug. Things can escalate. Escalate? I looked at Karen. She finally spoke. You wanted your mail, she said calmly. Now you have it. The black SUVs pulled away slowly, leaving dust in the air, leaving silence behind. I stood in my driveway alone. The sun was starting to set, and for the first time since moving here, I felt like I wasn't just fighting an HOA president. I was fighting something bigger, something old, something that buried its name 28 years ago, and thought no one would ever dig it back up. But here's what they didn't know. I didn't retire from the service because I was tired. I retired because my last assignment ended, and I was very good at uncovering things people tried to hide. Karen thought she cornered me at the post office. She thought she scared me with fake violations. She thought those black SUVs would make me back down. She was wrong. If Redwater changed land records once, what else did they change? And why was the county warning me instead of defending the HOA? The lake looked peaceful, but peace can hide a lot of secrets. And tonight, at that emergency meeting, I was going to find out what they were so desperate to protect. Because one thing was clear now. They weren't afraid of me owning the path. They were afraid of what I might find at the end of it. By the time the sun dropped behind the trees, the whole neighborhood felt different. Curtains moved, porch lights flicked on earlier than usual. People were watching. Not just me, watching the path, watching Karen's house, watching the black SUVs parked 2 streets over. I changed into a clean shirt, folded the county letter carefully, and slipped it inside a thin leather folder. I didn't rush. I didn't slam doors. Calm makes people nervous. As I stepped outside again, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again, I answered. This is Collins, the deputy. You going to the meeting? He asked. Yes. Good. Don't argue. Just listen. That's not really my style. A quiet exhale on the other end. They're trying to push an emergency lien through tonight. My steps slowed. On what grounds? Safety violation tied to unstable terrain on your newly claimed land. That's made up. Yes. Can they do that? They can try. If it passes, they can block access until inspection. Inspection by who? He didn't need to say it. Redwater. They want control of that path back before sunrise. Collins eyed. Ask them one question tonight. What question? Ask why Redwater. Development still holds management authority in a dissolved filing. My heart didn't race. It got colder. Dissolved? I asked. On paper, Redwater shut down in 2008. I looked toward the street where their SUVs sat earlier. They didn't look dissolved. No, he said quietly. They didn't. The line went dead. I kept walking toward the clubhouse. Maple Grove's clubhouse sat near the center of the development. Brick building, flagpole, big glass doors. It looked harmless. Inside, it wasn't. The parking lot was full. Neighbors stood in small groups whispering. Some avoided eye contact. Some gave me quiet nods. One older woman squeezed my arm as I passed. Be careful, she whispered. Inside, folding chairs were set in rows. Karen stood near the front table with 3 board members, all serious, all tense. Behind them, a projector screen showed a slide. Emergency Land Safety Review. Parcel 17B. That was my parcel. I walked down the center aisle slowly. Karen's eyes followed every step. When I reached the front row, she smiled. I'm glad you came, she said sweetly. I wouldn't miss it. The meeting started fast. No welcome speech, no small talk. Karen stood up. As you all know, she began. Earlier today, a serious issue arose regarding restricted community access near the lake. Murmurs. She clicked the remote. A photo appeared on the screen. The lake path, zoomed in, with a red circle around the tire tracks. Unauthorized vehicle movement has damaged protected ground. She didn't look at me when she said it. I raised my hand. She ignored it. This creates liability risk for all residents. Another slide. An image of the buried Redwater sign, but cropped. The older carved name was cut out. Interesting. The board recommends immediate suspension of access to Parcel 17B pending structural review. She paused. And placement of a temporary HOA lien to prevent unauthorized development. There it was. I stood up. You forgot something. All eyes turned. She tilted her head. Yes, you forgot to mention the county deed correction. Her smile didn't break. That document is under review. By who? The board. I held up the leather folder. The county doesn't answer to the board. A board member shifted uncomfortably. Karen's voice sharpened. You are disrupting an official meeting. No. I said calmly. I'm protecting my property. Murmurs grew louder. One neighbor stood. Wait. He owns the path now. Karen turned toward her. Ownership is disputed. I opened the folder and handed the letter to the nearest resident. Read it. The paper passed down the row. Eyes scanned. Whispers spread. It says it's his. County seal and everything. Karen's jaw tightened. This correction was based on incomplete records, she said quickly. That was my moment. I looked straight at her. Why does Redwater Development still have management authority in a dissolved filing? The room went still, dead still. Karen didn't blink. What are you talking about? You heard me. One of the board members leaned toward her. Karen, she waved him off. Redwater handled the early development logistics, she said. They have no current control. Then why were there private security vehicles on my street? Silence. Neighbors started turning in their seats. What security vehicles? I saw them too. Someone from the back said. And why? I continued. Does their logo match the paperwork you filed for the emergency lien? I held up a copy of the orange notice from my door. Gasps, because the small logo in the bottom corner wasn't HOA. It was Redwater. Karen's face changed. Not angry, not shocked. Cornered. You're making accusations without proof, she snapped. I have proof. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. A photo appeared. The back of the buried sign. The carved Redwater Development Corp. Dated 1998. I mirrored it to the projector through the clubhouse Wi-Fi. The image filled the screen. Now the older carved name wasn't cropped. It was clear. This sign was buried on land the county says is mine. I said. Why? The room exploded with whispers. Karen slammed her hand on the table. This meeting is adjourned. No. An older man said loudly. It's not. People were standing now. Questions flying. What is Redwater? Why didn't we know about this? Why are private security here? Karen looked at the board. They looked back at her. And in that moment, I saw it. They weren't in control. She was. A side door opened suddenly. Two of the Redwater security men stepped inside. Uninvited. That's enough, one said firmly. This is private property. He meant the clubhouse. But he looked at me. The crowd turned. Who let them in? Someone asked. Karen didn't answer. I stepped forward. This is exactly why we're asking questions. The taller security guard spoke again. Sir, you are interfering with contractual land arrangements. What contract? I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at Karen. She nodded slightly. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about lake access. It wasn't about terrain. It was about something older, something Redwater didn't want exposed. I walked toward the projector and switched slides, because earlier, while they were setting up, I had connected to the open network and accessed the shared board drive, and what I found was interesting. A scanned document dated 2005, title, Temporary Utility Easement, Redwater Development, signed, not by the county, not by residents, but by Karen. The room saw it. Gasps again. That's not real, she said quickly. It's on your board server, I reply. One board member stood up abruptly. Karen. What is that? She looked trapped, then angry. You don't understand, she snapped at all of them. If that path gets resurveyed, the entire shoreline zoning changes. What does that mean? Someone shouted. She hesitated. Too long. The older man from earlier spoke slowly. It means whatever is under that land was never approved. Silence. My stomach tightened. Under that land. I stepped closer to Karen. What's under the lake path? She glared at me. You don't want to know. I already do. The security guards moved slightly, blocking, protecting her. That told me everything. I pulled out one more thing from my folder. A small USB drive. Before coming here, I stopped by county archives, I said calmly. There was an old environmental review tied to Redwater's original development plan. Karen's breathing changed. It mentioned underground storage structures. The room went quiet again. Storage for what? A woman asked softly. I looked at Karen. She shook her head slightly. Don't. I continued. Chemical waste. The word hit the room like a brick. That's a lie. Karen shouted. Is it? I asked. I turned the projector to a scan page. Highlighted text. Temporary containment beneath recreational shoreline corridor. Dated 1999. Signed by Redwater engineers. Gasps turned into anger. You built homes over that. Someone yelled. It was removed. Karen snapped. Was it? She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. One of the board members stepped back from the table like it was on fire. You told us this was about landscaping violations, he said. Karen's voice cracked for the first time. It was contained. It was safe. That if the county reopens the parcel, they'll test the soil. And, I pressed. And if they test. She stopped. The older man finished the sentence. They'll find it. Everything clicked. Redwater buried chemical storage under the lake path, filed fake records, transferred authority quietly, dissolved publicly, but continued operating through the HOA. And Karen wasn't just a loud president, she was protecting something. Something illegal. The security guards stepped forward again. This meeting is over, one said firmly. Before anyone could respond, the front doors opened. Uniformed deputies walked in, real ones, including Collins. The room erupted. Karen went pale. Collins didn't look at me first. He looked at her. Ma'am, we need to speak with you regarding falsified land filings and environmental concealment. Her lips trembled slightly. This is harassment, she whispered. He stepped closer. Is Redwater Development funding your HOA operations? Silence. That's what we thought. The security guards slowly backed toward the exit. One tried to slip out. Another deputy blocked him. We'll need identification, Collins said calmly. The room buzzed with shock. Karen looked at me, tear hate in her eyes. You did this. No, I said quietly. You did. As deputies began separating people, Collins leaned toward me. You weren't supposed to find that file so fast. I wasn't supposed to get my mail either. He almost smiled. Outside, neighbors gathered in clusters, phones out, voices rising. The quiet little Maple Grove development wasn't quiet anymore. Redwater wasn't dissolved. It was hiding. And Karen wasn't just an HOA bully. She was the shield. But here's the twist they didn't see coming. As Collins escorted her toward the door, she stopped, turned back, and said something that froze my blood. You think you saved them? She said softly. You just opened something bigger than all of us. Collins tightened his grip. What does that mean? I asked. She didn't answer. She just smiled and let herself be let out. The neighbors surrounded me with questions. Is our water safe? Are our homes contaminated? What happens now? I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing. This wasn't just about one buried storage site, because dissolved companies don't hire active security, and fake filings don't last 20 years without help. Someone bigger was involved. And if Karen was just the shield, then who was behind her? As the patrol lights flashed outside the clubhouse windows, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I stepped away and answered. A different voice this time. Low. Calm. You should have left the path alone. Who is this? You don't need to know. I think I do. A short pause. Then the voice said something that changed everything. Redwater was only the middle layer. The line went dead. Middle layer. That meant there was something above them, and something below. I looked toward the lake through the clubhouse windows. Dark now. Still. Quiet. But beneath that quiet, something had been buried for decades, and now it was exposed. The deputies were arresting Karen. The board was collapsing. Redwater security was being questioned. Neighbors were panicking. And yet, I had the strongest feeling the real fight hadn't even started. Because when powerful people hide something underground, they don't panic over dirt. They panic over what the dirt connects to. And tomorrow morning, county environmental teams would be digging on my land. Not theirs, mine. Which meant whatever they found would have my name attached to it. And if Redwater was only the middle layer, then whoever sat at the top was about to notice me. The next morning, I woke to the sound of heavy machinery outside my house. The entire lake path had been cordoned off by county officials who bright vests. Trucks, surveyors, and environmental engineers moved quickly, mapping the land and taking soil samples. Neighbors gathered at the edge of my property, whispering nervously. Karen's SUV was nowhere to be seen, but the memory of her glare yesterday still lingered. Deputy Collins was the first to approach me. We've confirmed the storage structures exist, he said quietly. They were buried deeper than records indicated, and Redwater didn't disclose anything. This goes beyond the HOA. We're bringing in the state environmental agency. I nodded, my heart thumped with relief and anticipation. The fight was bigger than I imagined. But finally, the truth was coming to light. Karen and her allies had tried to hide decades of misdeeds, manipulate records, and intimidate neighbors, but the law and the evidence were on my side. By mid-afternoon, the digging teams uncovered the first large concrete vault. Cameras rolled. County officials documented every step. As suspected, it contained chemical containers marked with outdated hazard warnings. The media arrived soon after, alerted by Collins, turning Maple Grove into the center of a national story. People had been threatened, lied to, and deceived for years. Now, justice was unfolding in real time. Karen, escorted by deputies, was facing federal charges for falsifying land records, environmental violations, and abuse of HOA authority. The board members who had blindly followed her were under investigation for complicity. Redwater's network was being exposed layer by layer, all thanks to a single resident refusing to be intimidated. I stood on my property, watching the lake path being secure. My wife arrived, and together we surveyed the land that was rightfully ours. The path, the lake, the buried secrets, all of it belonged to our family now. There was a sense of calm settling over Maple Grove, but also a quiet reminder. Truth always has a way of surfacing. A neighbor approached with a small smile. You saved us all, he said. I shook my head. No. We just let the truth do the talking. As the sun set over the lake, the water glimmered peacefully, hiding nothing anymore. Justice had been served. Families were safe. And the legacy of decades of deception had ended not with violence, but with persistence, evidence, and the courage to stand firm. And somewhere, I knew Karen was learning the hardest lesson of all. Entitlement and fear can't override law, land rights, or the truth. Maple Grove would never be the same, and neither would she. The lake was calm. The path was mine. And for the first time in years, peace felt earned, not given.